So I teach the Alexander technique, and I'm not going to teach you today. And the reason is that it's a one-on-one, hands-on, kind of experiential thing, and I can't do that here. So instead, we're going to talk about the Alexander technique, introduce the ideas behind it, the principles, and that sort of thing. So you'll get a sense of it. And the first thing, I come out of biology, and so a lot of Alexander technique is best understood by getting a little basis in anatomy. And since I'm a veterinarian, I like to use comparative anatomy. So the first thing we're going to do is observe how it is that fish sing. This guy has a little performance anxiety, and sometimes nothing comes out. So I'm going to put it up a few times to get this. He has more repertoire, so I want to give you two takes on this because the technique might be a little different if it works. Okay, one thing that was really obvious in this guy's technique was the use of the head and the neck, right? There's a lot of that going on, so we're going to talk more about that. The basic principle of the Alexander technique is that we are not just disembodied consciousness, okay? It's kind of sometimes we think we're out there in the mind and it's very ephemeral and all of that, but there's actually more to us than just that. For one thing, it's biologically based, and mind, brain, very connected. So we're talking about the brain, and we're talking about what gets the brain to go round, which is the body. It kind of transports things. But there's actually more to us than just a head and legs and brain. Okay. We have other stuff, which is convenient because we wouldn't be able to sing very well just on our heads. These bits look probably more familiar. Everybody has those things. So here's one depiction that looks somewhat like what we are. And it has a head and a neck and a back and limbs, like legs and arms. But you probably noticed something about this that's very different from the fish. It's kind of stiff. And it's kind of like a Tin Man. And really, we're not that stiff. We're not just body parts. But if we start to think in terms of body parts, it influences the way we use our bodies. And you may have noticed sometimes with vocal technique, it's not as easy as you think it is. Because you think, okay, I know what to do, I'm going to do it. And then when you go to think about it too hard, it almost ties you up in knots. Everybody else has had that experience, but I certainly have. So it's not this. It's more like this. This is a tensegrity toy, Buckminster Fuller. And what we're doing with this is noticing that you can think of these things as bones, these stiff members, right? And these are kind of the joints where everything joins. And then they're connected by elastic things. And one thing that's really fascinating about this is that you can't really move one thing only. It's all connected. So everything is connected to everything else. And if you do anything, it impacts on the shape, it impacts on the function of all this other stuff. So this is a lot closer to what we are because we have bones, we have muscles, we have connective tissue. Anybody been to the bodies exhibit down in South Street? Yeah. Do you know those things where they take parts away and you have like the whole body in connective tissue? Or you'll have the whole body in blood vessels, or the whole body in muscles, and they can move various bits. So there's a lot of webby kind of stuff going on with the connections of everything to everything. And if one part is screwed up, it's not just one part. It has influences elsewhere because we need to compensate, and that usually is an invitation to overcompensate. I'm just going to give out one more of these. Thank you. You're welcome. And we don't want that. So how do we overcompensate? Well, how about if we want to stand up? We have some choices how to do that. To sing. We could even do it sitting down, but we can kind of have really good posture and kind of stiffen up like a ballet dancer or a military person. It's hard to really see this in a sock puppet, but you know, you can get the sense of what the sock puppet is doing on the inside with the armature, okay? That gets really tiring really fast because really we're not designed to do that kind of thing. There's another choice that feels so horrible that we want to kind of relax, which usually means kind of collapse. And sock puppets are much better at this because this is more their nature and you don't have a lot of bones to get in the way. But try to sing collapse sometime and see how well that works. And that has its own kind of exhaustion built into it. This is not a real body. So let's look at a real body. This was a young man in India, died around 1970. And so we have a skeleton here. This is a real skeleton, a real human skeleton. It's helpful sometimes to see the actual skeleton because, you know, everything is virtual these days. So come on up and check it out. You may never have actually gotten this close to one. You know, you've seen a glass case somewhere off in a museum or something. Yeah. So what he's got here, he's got the skull, right? He's got a neck, and he's got a backbone. So come on over here so you can actually see the backbone. Back here we have the spine, and it's made out of all these little individual bits. Okay, it goes down to the sacrum. And then there's a pelvis, and the legs connect to that, and they come out. And these two things, the scapula back here, they're part of the shoulder girdle that just sits on top of the rib cage. It's not really attached. It's attached here by screws, but in real life, it sits on there and it's attached by sort of strips of muscle and stuff like that. And when we want to move our arms around, these scapula actually move to give us mobility, so we can do this and this and this and all kinds of stuff. And so there is a bony armature, there is a bony backbone to all of this, and then what makes it move around is muscles. And I've put a few muscles here. And these muscles are made out of ribbons of 2 different colors. And that's because there are different kinds of muscle in the body. So if you look in the back, you'll see kind of the fire engine red ones. And that's the kind of muscle that runs up and down the spine in the back, right next to the bones. And it's really pretty centrally located. And that's what's actually supposed to be holding us up in the most efficient manner. And these are muscles that are kind of deep. If you see pictures in the books of muscles of the body, you really want to see these guys, because they're covered over with layers of muscle that go this way and that way and that way and that way. And they're way on the bottom, and we kind of forget about them. We don't tend to use them unless those of us who are really coordinated, say maybe, you know, Fred Astaire, Muhammad Ali, something like that. For the most part, these muscles get ignored a lot, which is too bad because they're what's supposed to actually be holding us up. They are the kind of muscle fiber that the birds use when they migrate, and for hours and hours, they're not getting tired. They're just kind of flying and flying and flying. If they get tired fast, they would never get there, okay? And this is type 1 muscle fiber. And then there are these maroon ones. And I haven't put all the muscles of the body here, I've just put some representative ones. So you go over here and look at these guys. They're the other kind of muscle fiber, and they're the kind that you would use for sprinting. You know, that you would go very fast for a very short period of time. They can make a brief effort, and then they tire, okay? So what are they doing? They're doing things like moving the ribs up and down, because we're not constantly moving the ribs. We move the ribs, and we stop. And we move the ribs, and so there's little rest things built in. They're in charge of elevating the sternum, they're in charge of what goes on connecting the shoulder here, the clavicle. They're in charge of connecting the head and the neck and the arms and things like that. They're also, this one seems to come off, they're also holding the leg in attachment to the rest of the body, so that, well, there is a stable joint here. This is a ball and socket joint. So it's not as if the hip is really going to fall out. This is not so stable. This might fall off. But for the most part, if you want to be moving your hips, then you're going to need to be using muscles to connect it. Now, interestingly, and we're not really aware of this because it goes on the inside, one of the main connections goes all the way up here, partway up the spine, the lumbar spine. So our leg, which actually comes in here, there's a problem with the idea of hips. There's the semantic issue. We talk about hips in terms of clothes. We're talking about the iliac crests. We're talking about this. But the joint is here. So if you stand there and you move your leg, and put your hand where the actual moving is, this is your hip, way in here. If we're thinking of it somewhere else, we're going to get kind of confused, and we're going to get into this kind of problem where we have an image that's going to mess us up. So you can see that there are muscles like this all over the place, and they are paired muscles. So there are two of these and two. For clarity, I'll just put one of each. And there are lots of other muscles elsewhere, but these will make the point. This kind of muscle is not really designed to hold us up. They're the muscles that we usually use to hold us up. Anybody see an old-fashioned tent? It has the pole in the middle, and goes out to the sides, and has the little pegs all the way around. And you know, that's how tents used to be. Okay. If the tent in the middle was well seated, so it was into the ground and it was sturdy and it was going to stay there, it wasn't on sand, it wasn't on a rock or something like that, then the little tent pegs all around the side were just there to pull the cloth out, give you the most space inside the tent. But if there was some kind of problem with that central pole and it really wasn't stable, you'd have to really get that peg in, so that they would counterbalance each other and they would tend to hold it up. So you would be using those outer tent pegs. That's what we're doing when we're using this kind of muscle. It has other jobs to do to hold ourselves up. The major function of the nervous system, the body and everything is to keep the head from hitting the ground. That's about it, okay? So one way or another, that's going to be a priority. But if we're prioritizing inefficiently and we're using all this stuff to keep us up, then it's not all that available for when we want to, for example, move or sing. So if you look back here, you see how these ribs are actually attached into the backbone here. So everybody come around because it's kind of important for seeing things. You notice that the ribs come in between all these little bones that are actually holding us up. And they're like little wedges. When they move, then they tend to push these little bones apart. So every time the ribs move like this, the bones are coming up a little bit. However, if the whole bone thing is locked down and really compressed, ribs can't move much. It kind of locks them in, and then you're kind of stuck. So what are you doing? You're using your diaphragm, you're trying to do something, but your ribs are kind of held. It's not going to be the most easy way, and it's not going to be the most efficient way of moving air. So this is one thing that's kind of important. The Alexander technique is largely about alignment and coordination of the head, neck, and back. So who cares from the point of view of singing? This is why you care. This is a big part of why you care, because ease of movement of moving the air is very key. Okay. So what happens here? We have the head, and it's on the neck, and it's balanced. And everybody has to kind of come in one by one because it's a little subtle, and I don't think you can see it from across the room. But what's actually going on is there's a little balancing point where on the skull, there are two little bumps here, and there are two little bumps on that top bone that it's balancing on. So check it out. Go look up in there. Everybody come over, and then I start singing. I'm going to try to see, and that's right up against the occipital area here in the skull. That's where this is sitting, and it should be able to rock. So really, you do need to come up, because this is really kind of important and central. And that little area in the back of the skull should be freely movable, and if it's being held, if it's stuck, if it's in some kind of embedded hardened muscle, then you start to have a problem. Remember this? You start to mess with one spot and everything else is kind of stuck. So as you come down from the skull, you come down the neck, and then the neck attaches to the back. You notice that the back it's not absolutely straight. His back is absolutely straight. That's part of his problem, okay? But we actually have some little bends in here, there's a little bend in the neck, and then it comes out here a little bit in the thorax, and comes back in the lumbar spine, and goes again into the sacral area. And there's a reason for that, and it does give you a certain amount of mobility and spring. The back is actually like a spring. If it's working right, it tends to be elastic and push you up. In between each of these bones, you may see it more easily in the front. They're like a little shock absorber. So come on around and see that. That's the intervertebral disc. You have these bony things, and then you have this other stuff in between. And they're little cushions, because if you had bone on top of bone grinding, it would be pretty painful every time one bone moved against another, which is all the time that you move. So think of it as a spring. Now you've got a spring, you've released the holding, there's no locking. So this is going up and down. Now if the spring is not attached, you've got a noodle, all right? So instead of having what you need to have for support, it's not able to function. So that means if you're not integrated here and coming all the way through, if you're blocking, if you're doing something that's just not right, you're going to have not a very functional situation. There's another not very functional situation. Here's the spring. I need somebody to kind of grab it with 2 fingers in the middle. Okay, that's the guy wire. That's what happens when you're trying to do this, but you've grabbed on somewhere. You've grabbed on somewhere inappropriate, and you're kind of holding yourself up. So the springiness is gone. So the springiness is good. It's not so good when it's not there. So what happens actually in the situation where we are in our normal life? Are we always kind of up? Are we always, when we're ready to sing, even when we're preparing, are we sometimes kind of tending to come down into a little bit of a slump? That's certainly a possibility. That happens to us often. So come on back, sit down. I'm going to show you some of the handouts. I have little white folders. If anybody doesn't have a folder, I have extra. If you look on the right-hand side, the top one has something like this. You got one of those? Okay. Check out this very left-hand image. This is the skull and the backbone. That's the basic thing. This is what we mostly are in terms of function, okay? And that's what fish are, which is why I started with fish. The fish kind of have the head, neck, and back. They're not very big on limbs and other stuff that they don't really need. This is the basic unit of our function. So this torso thing, this spine, is really pretty crucial. So all that's really important there is the skull and the backbone. And that's just what you see here, the skull and the backbone. The next one over, which is a little bit to the right, is the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves that come off of that, okay? So this is the central nervous system. You have the brain, and then it sends out all this information, and it goes out to the periphery all along these nerves. There's a whole other set of nerves, the autonomic nervous system, which we're not going to get into today. But, again, it's not so important about it. Don't tell this to the Olympic people, but, the arms and the legs and stuff like that. This is the central core. Okay, here's the person. Arms, legs, but yes, but still, this is the major piece that we're concerned with in terms of our stability, in terms of our general coordination and motion. So if you look at the next one, which should look something like this, the one that was under it, you see a slightly more clear version of what I was trying to do with the soft puppet, in that a lot of us choose one of the 2 choices on the left. We're either a little bit kind of collapsed down into the chest, or we're really trying and we're pushing ourselves up like a ballerina or a military type person. Neither one of this is really going to be sustainable for long in a functional way. If you look at the big one, that sort of alignment is more appropriate. This is what the bones actually do when you don't mess with them. If you look at this guy, that's what he's doing. He's not distorting out of this. And what turns out to be the key to making this possible is this little tiny area back here. It turns out that if you lock this and you lose the mobility, and you have a tendency to go push back and hold yourself, then nothing else below it has a chance. Everything else below it, because of the muscles that come down that are supposed to be controlling this, is put into a rigid situation where it doesn't have that spring. This is just the way it works anatomically and functionally. So Alexander's work is very, very focused on what goes on in the head, in the neck, and the back as a functional elastic unit. If you look at the third handout, the one that is below those, it shows somebody sitting. This is to make the point that we don't just stand, we move around. And every move that we make is some kind of version along the trajectory from standing to sitting. We don't just stand or we don't just sit, but we're either up, part way, or 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 somewhere along here in this plane, nothing that spirals right now, is what we're doing. So pretty much any move that we make is going to be somewhere along this. So one of the big things that's done in Alexander's teaching is to use the idea of getting into and out of the chair as a kind of symbol for movements and learning how to do them. If you look at the person on the right-hand side, the black, you'll see that there are correlates to the standing one. There's somebody who's sort of slumped over, just like the person who was standing slumped over. There's somebody who's pushing her back in and narrowing it to hold herself up in the middle there. And there's somebody who's just right, like the three bears on the bottom. Again, that kind of alignment. Now, what is it that makes this possible when you're sitting? If you look at these top images that are A and B, you'll see that there are kind of two ways to sit on the pelvis. And if you look at this guy, this is the pelvis, this whole thing. And the very lowest point is here. And the theory is, if you're sitting on the lowest point, which you will see kind of in A, then everything else is more or less in alignment and can come up from there. But if you're sitting on your tailbone, like in B, you start behind the 8 ball. And it's very hard not to be in a sort of C curve after you started with that. One of the biggest offenders for this sort of thing to cause problems for us is bucket seats, especially in cars. And so this illustration is just showing you how you can use a wedge to keep from going into the tailbone stance. But this happens all the time. And we're just not aware of it, we just don't know. And that's kind of an interesting thing. We don't know what we're doing because we're just so used to doing it a certain way that we don't think about it. And that's good, because when we were little tiny kids and we were learning how to pick up our heads, we had to keep trying a whole bunch of ways to finally get the head picked up, and then we could pull ourselves up, and then we could take a couple of steps. And if we still had to go through that process, every time we wanted to go to the door, we would not get to the door very often. So we formed these sets of coordination that we've all linked together. We know how to do this now, and we do it the way we practiced it in. That was the best way. It feels right because it's habitual, but it's not necessarily the best way. And part of the tricky bit is that as we increase the muscle tone, as we're using more effort, because we're not doing this so efficiently, when muscles kind of crunch down a little bit and hold in contraction, the sensors that are inside the muscles to tell us what's going on are getting squashed, and they're not working so well. So did you ever have something hurt and you kind of tense it to keep it from hurting? You're kind of turning down the volume on your sensors. We're turning down the volume on our sensors all the time. So because of that, we don't really know what we're doing. It's kind of surprising sometimes. Take a look at the handout that's under that, which is the two people, the old person doing two separate things. And now we're talking about that sitting standing business. And the person on top is kind of, well, now, okay, so I have to get out of the chair, right? So if I'm going to get up, I have to throw my head back to counterbalance, the weight of everything else. Wrong. When you're doing that, you're doing this. And when you're doing this, you're locking the whole sort of elastic mechanism of the backbone. So this is kind of an Alexander no-no, but we all do it because we know where we're doing it. And look what happens when you do it. It makes the rest of you turn into a bit of a corkscrew to compensate on the way down. as opposed to not doing it, keeping your head more or less in line with your neck and back, and not having so much of a twist. When you've done all that twist, it takes a lot of effort to go into the twist and has a lot of effort to move around under those circumstances. If you look at the fourth handout, the one below it, it has all kinds of imagery on it. Singers know all about imagery, right? No? The guy on the right has a steel rod up his back, which, you know, most of us don't need unless we have some real serious orthopedic problem. But I think the idea here is, see the arrow coming up? Everything from the pelvis up, everything from here up is torso. The legs are legs, and they come down. So you'll see another arrow coming down, okay? So if you're thinking up, thinking as if you were coming up, not pushing yourself up, not making it happen, thinking up, you'll engage this elastic mechanism. Thinking as if you were, this is losing a bit of oomph, but as if you were a helium balloon and you were just coming up, like the little head here that's floating away on the upper left-hand side. Thinking as if you wanted it to come up, forming an intention, not thinking in words, forming a sort of wish for this to occur, and then letting it happen. A lot of stuff in voice, you don't actually know what little muscles you're messing with, exactly what you're doing, but it's done more in terms of some thought that you'd like to have, or some image, or something. The guy in the middle who has swallowed the umbrella. One of the points that can be made here is that we're not dogs and cats and horses, so we're not cursorial. So we don't have a deep chest with our arms coming out where we just do this, but we use our arms a lot this way. And because of that, we're wider than we are deep. So this is wider, and this is the other way. If it were a horse or a dog, it would be in the other dimension. So what happens when you have this situation is sometimes we forget about the depth. But in fact, if you're allowing the ribs to move, to breathe, they're kind of like bucket handles. They come up and out, and this entire chest expands in all the dimensions, and you're moving a lot more here. Okay. Alice, who's just swallowed some substance, right, is kind of pushing herself up. I mean, not really, it's the mushroom, but the idea is we don't want to make it happen. We can't sort of do it. If we sort of do it, then we're just putting tension someplace in order to make it happen. We're using these guys. Okay? If we're thinking it and allowing it to happen, then that's a whole different story. So, not that. This is very subtle business about what does it mean not to do, and you can spend a lot of Alexander time on that. And we're not going to do that today. So those are those basic handouts. So in terms of, oh yes, if you just look on the left and you take a look at Deborah Voigt, this is Deborah Voigt getting herself a very mixed view, and look what she's doing to her head and neck. So is that why she's having trouble with the Schoenberg? I can't prove that. Okay. So now we're going to do a little bit of experiential stuff. The technique is generally taught one-on-one, and the teacher will use hands to convey the sense of direction, which is that intention, thinking, and the decrease in muscle time. We use so much more muscle effort than we really need to, and it's so hard to realize that until you've had the experience. But I can't really do that with all you guys, so I'm going to have some things that you can do as a group. And the first thing is going to be to think about the influence of our thinking on our body. There really is a surprising amount of connection. So you're sitting in a chair, and I need you to be thinking about really supporting. You know, your feet are on the ground. You're going to be holding yourself up. You have to be really grounded and solid, and think about your legs just going down to the center of the earth, and taking all that gravity from all the weight of the the whole atmosphere coming down, and all this on you, and you're holding yourself up. And the only thing that's keeping you from sinking into the earth is the fact that you're really kind of connecting, and you're using a lot of effort to kind of push down so that you can't be squashed down by all of this. Now, pick up your right leg just off the ground a little bit, 6 inches. Okay, see how that feels. Right? We'll put it down. Okay, now we're just sitting in a chair, and we're thinking like, oh, and we're going to do the balloon thing, and we're just thinking and everything is light and released, and it's coming up, and go ahead and pick up your right leg again. Does it feel different? It should. Okay, your thinking has an impact. It has an influence on what you're doing. And that's what this is really all about. Okay, so now I have balloon vertical. This balloon has volunteered to make this point because you need to know this, and it's for, you know, the greater good and everything. But it's not for the greater good of the balloon. And this is an awl. Everybody knows what an awl is, right? You punch holes with stuff in, you know. So we're gonna pop it, okay? And just be ready because it's gonna make a big thing, and I don't want to scare anybody. And here we go. All right. Did anybody feel like a sort of? Okay, that's what we do all the time. What we do is we cringe. Something happens and we kind of, and then, you know, some other bad thing, and pretty soon it's like, all right. And if you live long enough, you'll accumulate these things, and they'll start to become kind of part of you. And sooner or later we'll find ourselves, all of us, because everybody has these experiences, pulled in a little bit, waiting for the next shoe to drop, that kind of thing. And it becomes normal, but it's not normal. And we're putting a tremendous amount of pulling in with all these muscles. We're just holding ourselves together, but we're not really. Yes?
So one of the joys of old age?
One of the joys of old age is letting that all go. Realizing that we don't have to do that. Realizing that if we can think our way out of it and have an experience of what it's like to release that excessive holding, then the central nervous system will say, hey, wait a minute, this is not normal, this is just habitual. This doesn't have to be like that. I don't have to kind of be in a cringe all the time. When the balloon didn't pop, and then you uncringed, because, oh, okay, I guess it's okay. Did I have to tell you how to uncringe? Or did you just kind of come out of it? You know, we can come out of it. It is possible. We are not condemned the older we get and whatnot. No. So this is a good thing. And this is what the Alexander technique is about, learning how to uncringe. What's a great situation regarding voice where cringing will start to occur? Performance anxiety. You're going to get up in front of these people, and it's the panel, and they're going to decide whether you're going to be admitted to the whatever, or, you know, have you such and such, or you'll be chosen, or you won't be chosen, or there's your person who, I don't want to screw up in front, you know. And so what do? Everything tenses, your mouth gets dry, and your breathing is a little short, and all of a sudden, you can't make fish noises, and it's just kind of not working. How to do that? The more you kind of say, I'm not going to do that, the more you think about it sometimes, the worse it is. It's like, don't think of the pink elephant over there. There's a way to approach this physically through the Alexander technique, okay? That you can undo all of this. Because you say, what am I doing under these circumstances? What is a cringe really? Well, a cringe is coming back in your head and neck. Cringe is this, okay? Cringe is coming in, bringing my shoulders in, doing this kind of thing, pulling in, pulling all this stuff together. A cringe is coming down. A cringe is pulling my legs in, coming into like a little crouched ball. Counterproductive. So how can we undo that? Don't do this to your head and neck. Do this. Be aware, and just make it happen. Be aware, think it. Think, no, I don't want to do that. And you'll have a shot at it. But just thinking isn't going to be enough, because you're going to have to practice. You've been putting these habits in for your whole life. And did anybody ever try to change a habit? And how many people have succeeded in changing habits recently? Successfully? Okay, it's not easy. All right? This is so simple, this stuff. It really is, it's subtle, it's profound. But basically, it's simple. It's not easy. Because, well, you know, voice, right? Just, okay. Right, okay. That's it. What's it? What do I do? So you know how it is, because you work with body all the time, because that's what singers do. It's just like that, only worse. Okay, so the Alexander technique. Okay, so we're going to do another experiential.
The balloon followed you.
Sorry?
The balloons followed
He
you.
is, yeah. I know. Just please don't pop me again. Everybody's sitting, and I need you to have your feet flat on the floor. And I need you to lean forward a bit in your chair. Just, you know, kind of come forward, like a 45-degree angle, okay? So your feet are on the floor, you're bending forward. All right? All right, so everybody's doing that. Now, take your head and neck, put your head back like you're looking up at the ceiling, but keep everything else the same, all right? And go ahead and stand up. Was that easy? Not so easy. Okay, go ahead and sit. Same deal, 45 degrees. Keep your head and neck coming in same direction as your head and your back now. Don't put it back like that. Just go ahead and keep it all aligned. And go ahead and stand up. Is there a difference? Okay. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about this kind of blocking mechanism because of the way the muscles work and the bones work. And we're doing it to ourselves all the time. We're doing it to ourselves when we get up to sing, and you know, we don't realize what we're doing. We don't. So sensory awareness is a big part of what we need to be doing. Okay. So now, what I'm going to ask you to do is, we're going to get short on time, so we're going to all do this one together. When you come out of the chair, getting your foot on the ground again, okay? I want you to do, now that you know all the secrets of the Alexander technique, I want you to do this properly. I want you to just come on up, and I think we'll do it one by one, okay? Watch the person who's doing it. That person will sit down, next person, and just watch what they're doing with their head and neck, because now they know, you know, not to do the bad thing, right? So let's start. Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. 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 Good. Okay. 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 All right. So, what we've all just done is a mild version, because now we're really paranoid about this. We don't really want to do it. But everybody pretty much who got up did this. To one degree or another, we did this. Because this is what we do, and this is what we're used to doing. And we have this idea that it's going to counterbalance us. So, you know, and we just sat here for 45 minutes. I hope you guys were awake and listening. How come we didn't do it right? You're going to do the same thing. You're going to put your hand lightly on the back of your neck so that you can feel if you start to bend, okay? So let's do it again. We'll start at this end now. Remember, this is in order to remind you what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah? Okay, go ahead. Good. All right. Next. Uh-huh. Right. Good. Okay. Okay. There you go. Right. And last but not least. Okay. Now I was watching. Everybody was better. All right. Did anybody feel any like little twitches? Twitches where your neck wanted to go? All right. But the very fact that you had your hand there brought awareness to that area and reminded you. And so you can change. So that's the big take-home lesson. You can change. All right. This is not an Alexander technique lesson. This is just an intro. Anybody, everybody who would like to try an Alexander technique lesson, I have a studio 15 minutes from here, and you're welcome to a free session because I really would like to follow up to show you what this really is. This is not the Alexander technique. It's just about it, okay? So you have my card in your packet, and you can call me, and we can set something up. It's like an hour, and it's in Armonk. And that's free. And it's free. Yeah, because it's really part 2 of this. But, you know, I don't have 15 hours, so right now I want to do other stuff. I don't know why. Alexander technique is more important, but that's it.